welcome back to Teen Story Share. This week we're continuing reading from Silver in the Blood by Jessica Day George, and I will put the link to last week's reading below if you missed that. Just a quick reminder for those of you that have been following. Dacia and Lou are two cousins. They're Romanian Americans from New York, and this is taking place in the 1890s. And they're traveling back to Romania for some sort of mysterious family gathering. They're traveling separately. Lou is traveling with her parents, and Dacia is traveling with her Aunt Kate. Dacia is in disgrace because of some sort of mysterious faux pas that she committed with a boy in London, but we don't know what she did yet. And there's some strange things happening on board the train when it gets stopped by a pack of wolves that keep running back and forth over the tracks. And finally, Dacia discovers Kate in a passionate kiss with some man that she doesn't know standing on the back of the train, and then the man disappears. So we're going to continue finding out more about what's going on here, and we're going to be hearing from the other cousin, Lou. From the desk of Miss Maria Louisa Newlander, 26th April 1897. To my dear Dacia, I am writing to you even though this letter will probably reach you long after I arrive in Bucharest and we are together again. Even so, I must confide this strange thing that has happened to me, and I know that Mama and Papa would be very upset if I were to tell them. I have no desire to be mewed up in my cabin for the remainder of the journey, and I am sure that would be the consequence of my confidence. There, enough teasing. You know I didn't mean to. I will tell you that yesterday, as I took the air upon the west deck, a strange young man approached me. There was no one else nearby, and I was watching the waves by myself. They are quite mesmerizing, and I am often drawn to the promenade. Quite suddenly, there was a man at my elbow. I did not see him approach. He was simply there. He was very tan, or perhaps naturally swarthy, with very dark hair that had a reddish tint because of the setting sun. I had ample time to note all this, you see, as he also looked me over in the most blatant fashion. I became quite flushed and turned to walk away when he began speaking to me. "Are you the wing?" he said. I stopped because it was such an odd question, and I did not understand it. I could not help myself. I turned and looked at him inquiringly. He had very dark eyes, almost black, and he was staring at me so intently I felt quite, well, naked, if you must know. "Are you the wing?" He said it again, and looked me up and down yet again. "You are not the claw, and there is never a smoke any more." Complete gibberish, Dacia. What was I to do? I simply goggled at him for a moment. When I gathered myself, I started to turn away again when he said, "You are the wing. I see it now." Whatever that meant, I decided that it was outside of enough, and I gave him one of Aunt Kate's patented looks. I'm sure you can guess which one, and many of New York's freshest young men would recognize it as well. "Sir," I said, "the sun has gone to your head, I'm afraid. First you addressed me without an introduction, and now you are speaking in riddles. Good day." I marched away and went to my cabin as quickly as I could, but I was quite shaken, and not the least by my own boldness. It was all I could do to dress for dinner, and Mama and Papa were afraid that I had taken too much sun myself. I felt so queer that I almost confided in them, but I could not bring myself to do so in the end. And so I confide to you, Dacia, to unburden my heart and imagine your indignation, even though I cannot witness it firsthand. I know that you are jealous of our stop in Paris. I would love to spend days looking in all the shops and seeing all the sights. So I know that my reluctance will be a shock to you, for I would much rather we not stopped at all and hastened onward to Romania. For even one such as I, ever chided for not being much in conversation, longs to have my bosom friend nearby, so that you and I may speak face to face again. Please do not think me a goose for this, if you get this letter before I arrive. Yours, Lulu. P.S. Rather thought you'd like this clipping I found upon our arrival. I don't know who Mr. Arcady is, but look at the next paragraph. And here's the newspaper clipping from the Society pages of Le Gazette de Paris, a Parisian newspaper. Society pages are kind of like, sort of like 1890s version of People magazine, basically. Society notes. All of Paris is agog at 2 new bachelors from foreign lands who have chosen to grace our fair city with their presence. The first eligible gentleman is Mr. Theophilus Arcady of Istanbul, lately arrived in our city on business. But despite his refusal to explain what this business might be, Mr. Arcady, the son of a prominent Turkish family, has been seen strolling the many parks and boulevards of Paris, quite sadly alone. We hope that Mr. Arcady finds someone to share his walks with soon. A noted opera lover, Mr. Arcady has also taken a box at the Paris Opera. Will he be staying the entire season? Certain young ladies breathlessly await the answer to that question. And American society is surely the poorer for having lost Mr. William Carver, son of Mr. and Mrs. Henry Carver of New York City, who has been seen in our many parks and public gardens with his sketchbook in hand. Mr. Carver is a noted amateur artist, and we are sure that he has found ample inspiration in our Parisian beauties to occupy his brush for some time. Monsieur and Madame Duchesne have been gadding about despite her delicate condition. And that's the end of the news clipping. Next chapter is Rue de Blanc. Lou had once had a governess who recommended she have a cold bath daily, followed by 2 large spoonfuls of cod liver oil to cure her of her nerves. She was very lucky in that, rather than taking the governess's advice, her father had simply dismissed the woman. My Louisa doesn't suffer from nerves, Mr. Newlander had insisted. She is a tender child and shy. I refuse to have her dunked in ice water every morning. It's more torture than cure. Lou's mother had protested at first. The governess's references had been impeccable. One of the Vanderbilt children had been in her care previously. But since Lou had never struck her as being nervous either, she let the matter drop. In the end, Lou and Dacia had shared a governess, a kindly, rather horse-faced woman who spoke impeccable French as well as Romanian, having had a Romanian mother just like Lou and Dacia. Though this didn't improve Lou's shyness one whit, it was markedly better than being tipped into cold water like a Puritan accused of witchcraft. Now that they were in Paris, however, Lou was feeling decidedly nervy, and wondered if she should order a cold bath the next morning. Of course, that would mean requesting such a thing from Vivienne, the frightening maid the hotel had assigned to Lou. Lou was doing everything possible for herself in an effort to avoid Vivienne. She missed Millie, her maid back home in New York, with great ferocity. Millie had a cheerful face and a snub nose covered with freckles, and brought Lou hot chocolate when she woke, without being asked. She knew just how Lou liked her room and her clothes and her food, and she never seemed to be judging any of her preferences. Lou had actually dared argue with her mother about bringing Millie, but Maria had been adamant that they not bring any of their servants, including her own lady's maid and Lou's father's valet, which displeased Mr. Newlander a great deal. Maria had insisted that her family's properties in Romania were well staffed, and so were the hotels, and thus there was no need. Now that Lou had encountered a real French maid, however, her mother's foible had gone beyond oddity to causing her outright distress. Added to the strain of travel, of being in a strange place and meeting strange people every day, having snobbish maids who pretended they didn't understand you, even though you had been told for years that your French was perfect. There was also that awful man to deal with. That awful man, as Lou had dubbed him, was the man from the ship who had approached her without invitation, and spoken so strangely. He was here, in Paris, and he seemed to appear out of nowhere whenever Lou left the house. She saw him watching her as she strolled the boulevards with her family, saw him sitting alone a few tables away at restaurants, even saw him on the bank of the Seine as they took a riverboat cruise. He was tall and dark, and perhaps 20 years old. His clothes were good without being exceptional, and he was always watching her. Every time he was near, Lou felt the most uncomfortable tingle up her spine, and she was coming to dread leaving the hotel. What if he approached her again? What if he spoke to her? His words were meaningless, truly, but there was something upsetting about them all the same. He didn't appear mad, and yet he spoke nonsense with the air of greatest conviction. She wished Dacia were there, and not only so they could discuss the strange events that her cousin had witnessed. Lou had gotten a letter from Dacia that very morning, describing Aunt Kate's scandalous tryst on the train, and her enigmatic words about someone or something paying tribute. Full of questions about this, Lou didn't even notice as that awful man sidled up to her outside a milliner's shop. Her mother was still inside, trying on hats, and had asked Lou to step out on the sidewalk and wait for her father, who was meeting them for lunch. The day was beautiful, the spring sunshine sparkling off the glass windows of the shops, and the Parisians out in their finest pastels. Lou tried to put the scandal with Aunt Kate and the man on the train out of her mind, and enjoy the weather and the glory of being in Paris, when she felt that sensation travel up her spine. "You are the wing. I see it clearly," said a voice behind her. She whirled to see that awful man standing no more than a pace away. "And you are more than that," he said. "You are a houri, taunting me with your gray eyes and your delectable form." Once again, his words did not make sense, although that bit about her delectable form sounded quite vulgar, and Lou was absolutely at the end of her tether. Without thinking, she raised her still-furled parasol and struck him about the head and shoulders with a violence that surprised both of them. He shouted an oath in some unknown language and ran off. Lou looked after him for a moment, panting, and screamed when someone came up behind her and asked if she was all right. She spun around to see her father standing there with a concerned look, and promptly burst into tears. Mr. Newlander quickly hailed a hansom and took her back to the hotel, where she lay on her bed with a cool cloth over her eyes until evening. Her mother insisted that she take supper on a tray in her room, and Lou did not object, but while everyone else was dining, she pulled on a dress and went downstairs to the hotel library to look up the word houri. Then she rather wished she hadn't. Next time we'll be back to Dacia's point of view, and we'll find out about the family house in Bucharest on the Calea Victoriae. Alright, hope you enjoyed the story for today. Have a great weekend and see you next time. Bye!